Okay, hello. I'm not sure if I'm live. Let me double check. Okay, hello. I'm not sure if I'm okay. I hear myself. So that means I am live and this is working. For those of you that interact with us a lot, you know that we're kind of trying to work out the kinks and talking to everybody. So YouTube Live is new to us, new to me, and we don't have the go to live with someone else available to us yet. That's in beta on YouTube. So had to get creative. So I'm glad this is working. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Katie. I'm the Senior Developer Advocate at BigCommerce, and along with Heather Barr, our Community Programs Manager, we have put together this hackathon with Stripe, and we are really, really excited that you guys are all here and participating. We got way more participants than we thought we would get, which is a super, super fun surprise. And most of the names on the list I have not seen in our previous hackathon. So I suspect some people that are here for this hackathon have not done hackathons before or haven't done a competitive one. Maybe they've done one at work. But I wanted to walk through some advice about how to be a successful hacker. So I have 6 tips for hackathon success. One thing to note, I can't actually see the chat today. I'm running this stream from OBS. So Heather is looking at the chat or the comments on the live. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in. Heather and I are also always available on, within working hours, but we're available on Slack. You can DM us. You can also shoot an email to devrel@bigcommerce.com, and that will get to our whole team. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns about the hackathon, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We are excited to hear from you. So the first tip that I have is to take time to plan. I think this is kind of one of those tips that comes up really early on in your coding experience if you are a developer, where it's just so easy to make the mistake of hearing a problem and jumping to your keyboard to solve it without taking a minute to kind of architect your solution or to really think through the edge cases and the inputs and the outputs and all that jazz. So one thing I tell everyone to do is really take time to plan. Don't start coding too early and be sure that your whole team is on the same page. I've seen it before. I've been on teams before where all of a sudden 2 groups or 2 people kind of had different ideas about what we were building. And that's just a lack of communication. So really communicate a lot up front, really set expectations and goals with your team all together. And I really recommend some sort of agile workflow. I don't know anyone that's working in modern tech who's not in some sort of adaptive agile workflow. But this is where everyone is working on something. Everyone's working on discrete elements of it, and you meet frequently to discuss progress and blockers and continued plans. So I really encourage those frequent touch points as part of your planning. The next is to be flexible. In a hackathon, teamwork and flexibility kind of go hand in hand. Sometimes people on your team aren't going to work well under pressure. Sometimes you're not going to. And sometimes your project isn't going to. Sometimes you get to 48 hours before the deadline and you realize, okay, what we had doesn't make sense, it doesn't work, and it doesn't fulfill any of the requirements for any of the prizes. And you just have to pivot really fast, and having a good attitude and being flexible is really going to impact what the outcomes are there. Pivoting might be necessary. There's probably a lot of teams that are going to get to a certain point and realize, okay, yeah, that idea we had is way out of scope. It's too big, or maybe it's way too small. And then you kind of have to ideate and figure out where to go from there. So I just really encourage you to be flexible. I know there are cash prizes for this hackathon, but it's not the end of the world. We're not solving any, huge global issues. We're just having some fun. So be flexible. And I think that also leads to having a little bit more fun when you're not so rigid and you're willing to kind of get creative and solve problems with your team. The third, okay, so the first 2 were kind of about you. The third is about the users. So I think it's really easy when you hear a hackathon prompt, or really any prompt ever, or even if you're a developer, people pitch you apps all the time. It happens to me all the time, even though I'm not like an app developer. People in my life always want to tell me about their app. And frequently the question I have for them at the end is like, who would use this? And I don't mean that to be mean. There's just a lot of ideas that aren't really built for a user. They're built for the sake of being built. And so what I would tell you to do is to kind of always have the user in mind, no matter what you're thinking about as far as your project goes. Something that we, the judges, are looking at is like creative problem solving and creating something that a real user actually wants, like we want the solutions to be things that real people struggle with, and these are solving real problems. And so keeping that user in mind all the time. If you are interested on our YouTube, I talk with my hands so much, I'm noticing it when I'm looking at myself. In our YouTube, there's a playlist from the last hackathon, and there's a 2-part session with one of our product managers, Aaron White, and it's about keeping users in mind. It's kind of like how to build something for users and then how to sell that thing again. So it's really interesting. And if you're interested in kind of how to pivot your brain around the user, I really recommend just going in and finding those. They're both super short. I think they're both less than 10 minutes and they might be really, really useful. Okay, number 4 is be strategic. You might be thinking, yeah, duh, obviously, it's competition. But for hackathons, there's a little bit of a unique vantage point for strategy. So you've been given the information in your hack pack about the prizes. There's 4 cash prizes on each track. There's the DevX track and the innovation track, and each has 4 prizes. And what I encourage everyone to do is to bounty hunt a little bit. Look at what those prizes are looking at and really try to frame what you're going to build so that you can win something. Of course, we will take any submission. Even if the submission has nothing to do with any of the prizes, we're excited to see what you build. But my advice to you is to think about what you'd like to build, look at what those prizes are looking for, and try to find something that you're going to be excited about building that's also potentially going to win something. And something I want everyone to keep in mind is that you're able to win up to all of the prizes on your track. So you're not limited to one award. Individual submissions can win more than one, up to $5,000. So if you do the math, you could win all of them in your vertical, and that would be fine. So there's also some strategy there. If you're wanting to sweep or you're wanting to target more than one prize, you're going to have to be strategic about what you're building and how you pitch it as a cohesive product. Is there anything else about that I want to look at? No, perfect. Okay, be strategic. And number 5, plan to build iteratively. So a huge mistake everyone sees, whether in a hackathon or at work or wherever people are building apps and solutions and writing code, is that scope creep is so dangerous, especially when you're on a tight timeline. So what I would encourage you to do, and so frequently we see people at the very end of hackathons I've been in, hackathons I've judged, where the day before they realize we're so out of scope, we're never going to finish this. And so instead of having an MVP that they've iterated on and they can submit basically at any time after the MVP is established or it's finished, they're kind of left with nothing. And that's such a bummer, especially when you put in a ton of time. So I always recommend start with your MVP. Establish what your MVP is with your group. What is the absolute minimum viable product that you would be proud to present to the judges? Or kind of proud, good enough. It solves something. It does something. It actually works, whatever. Establish what that's going to be, and then establish what features you would implement afterwards. So you can establish however many rounds of post features you want. People can, if you're working in this agile methodology, people can pick up these features, they can add them right after that MVP is done, and you can really make a lot of progress. What you don't want to do is never establish what the MVP is, have people kind of spinning their wheels on less important things for days, and then realize at the end you've spent all this time and you really don't have anything to present. In this case, we're having you guys film a 3 to 5 minute demo video and then also submit your GitHub repo. And that's, number 1, really convenient for us. And number 2, really convenient for you guys, because if you guys send us a repo and we can't get it to run, we can watch the demo video and know that like this did something, that, you know, we can see it. As a lot of you know, sometimes it can be very time intensive to get other people's programs running on your machine. And with like over 100 participants in this hackathon, it's just not going to work. So think about so if you get to a point where you're finished and you're, you know, a day early and you want to make your video, also feel free to talk about what you would add afterwards. I think that's become, if any of you have participated in a lot of hackathons, I think that's almost like a funny hackathon trope. But when you can't finish it, just explain it. And so feel free to talk in your video about what you might add if you had a little bit more time. What were you working on that you just couldn't get to because of the time constraint? But planning to build iteratively, such a tongue twister. Planning to build iteratively prevents you from getting to that endpoint and needing to just go face to camera talking about an app that doesn't exist. Rather, you have something to present and you can explain how you might improve it, and that kind of thing. So just be sure, plan your MVP. And the last, keep an eye on the clock. I have done this before where submissions for Hackathon are due at noon, and I'm there typing as fast as I can at 11:59, hoping that I submit before the window closes. And it is so unnecessary and so stressful. Keep an eye on the clock. No one's submissions are due. They're due at midnight, at the end of the day, so I guess 11:59 on April 5th. Of course, if you live in like a totally disparate time zone from Central and you're like, this isn't going to work, totally fine. Just let us just communicate with myself or Heather, and we can be sure to we can make a very clear plan of when your project is due. But just be really aware of when things are due. Really keep an eye on time management. If you are someone who tends to like go down a rabbit hole because you found this bug and you want to find, you know, blah, 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 you got to resist it during a hackathon. You got to stay really focused on what you're trying to do and how quickly you're trying to do it. Be sure you understand the requirements of the hackathon. Make sure that you don't spend all this time working on something just to realize, oh, this doesn't really work with the prompt. Know the deadline is April 5th, and know what is required of you. So in this hackathon, again, I just mentioned this, but I'll mention it again, and we'll be sure also to talk about this in Slack early next week just to get everybody ready. But we're expecting 2 things from all of you, or from every team rather. And we'll send out a form where you'll submit this also, but one is a GitHub repository. It's completely fine if you want that GitHub repo to be private. We understand, especially if you're building things that you might actually ship, you don't want this to just be like a public repo. And so we'll share with you the usernames on GitHub that you have to just share that with. And then the other is a 2 to 5 or 3 to 5 minute demo video. So you can film that using OBS, you can do it on Zoom, Google Meet, whatever. And ideally host it somewhere and send us the link. So Zoom is a really easy one because they just like produce you a link. I think Google does too. OBS just compresses videos really easily. But we'd prefer the links, easier for us. And the video is twofold. Like I said, it just makes it a lot easier to judge on a tight timeline. And if anyone had a project that's really hard for us to get running, they're not just like immediately disqualified because we can't get it running. We'll be able to watch the video. And the video also gives you an opportunity to talk to us about your project. So now you have 3 to 5 minutes to tell us what you built, why you built it. And again, I totally encourage talking about what you might add on if you had a little bit more time. I think that's like really fun context for judges, especially for this type of thing where like we really hope that a lot of you pursue shipping these solutions and getting things into the App Store, getting things into these open source projects. We really hope you pursue them. So talking to us about them is cool for us for judging, but also just cool for us in general. Like we work in this ecosystem and we want to hear what you've built. So that's like a super long-winded and very, very tangential way to say, keep your eye on the clock. It is a huge waste of your time to accidentally overshoot the deadline. And of course, like we're very understanding and we totally understand these time zones are crazy. This is a global hackathon. But just keep that in mind and be sure to communicate with Heather and I. If you live, on the opposite side of the world from the central time zone and turning that in at that time just totally will not work for you, no problem. Just let us know and we'll work something out. And that is it. Those are my 6 tips for being a successful hacker. So number 1, if you are like, okay, I still don't get it. I don't understand why I'm doing this hackathon. I have written 2 blogs about hackathons. One is Why Hack in a Hackathon, and one was about my first Web3 hackathon a year and a half ago. And I don't understand the UX of YouTube Live, but I think when this is published, I already have them in the description of this live. So they'll be there, and I'll also post them in Slack if you just want to check those out for context. And the other thing is, please be sure to be connected with us. I know I'm beating a dead horse for any of you who have tuned into all of these, but if you did not consent to us emailing you, totally fine, no big deal, but you need to make sure you're in Slack if that's the case, because we have sent things out via email to people, and if you're not in Slack and you don't accept emails, we have no way to communicate with you. So just be sure you're in Slack. If you're not and you don't know how, shoot an email to devrel@bigcommerce.com, or wait, this is not backwards the way I'm used to. It's up there. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You're here right now, so it's very easy to subscribe. Those are the Twitter handles for myself and for BigCommerce, and then that's my GitHub. So if you want to just get out of the gate and share your project with me, I will be one of the people you have to. But other than that, happy hacking. I'm really excited to see what you guys all build. And my door is always open if you have questions about anything to do with this hackathon. Please either, you can email me, you can DM me on Twitter, you can DM me on Slack, you can comment on this YouTube. I am extremely available. So please reach out if you have any questions.